So as you know, I made that little equation so that we could see a visual of just how much the probability is for getting a factory new skin when getting a drop. And it works, but what it revealed to me a couple of days later as I was looking over it was something I did not expect. One of the biggest pricing gaps that shouldn't exist. There are guns right now with the same utility as a trade-up filler, same collection, same rarity, same aesthetic demand, but yet their prices differ by up to 40% in some cases. And they're everywhere. Now, as I'm sure you know, the trade-up update changed how trade-ups work fundamentally. Take the SSG Acid Fade. This was the best filler in the game for a long time. 2 million of them in supply, and the float cap 0 to 0.03, meaning every single gun was factory new. Even the worst floats, 0.029, you could take 9 of those, one field tested gun, and if you hit that 10%, you would have a factory new outcome. This was one of the easiest routes in the game for profitable trade-ups, and Valve killed it by replacing it. But how they replaced it is still confusing to a lot of people. What the update did was normalize every float cap to 0 to 1. So now that 0 to 0.03 acid fade was now technically being counted as 0 to 1, meaning that your 0.029 acid fade, that would now result in a 0.87 battle scarred output. Most people saw the nerf, sold, and moved on. Prices of the acid fade went from around $4.50 for the cheapest one to around $1.50 to $2. And yes, the acid fade was nerfed, but it wasn't made worse than any other skin in the game. It was merely equalized. But what does equalized actually mean? What's the new baseline? And there is an answer to that question, and the answer is 3%. So yes, my equation shows that the odds of factory new are different, but the odds of having an eligible trade-up filler that will yield a factory new output is 3%. 0 to 1 float caps remained unchanged because they were always 3%. The acid fade took the biggest hit because what was once 100% of its supply eligible is now 3%. So it lost 97% of its supply to be eligible for trade-ups. Now I don't expect you to take that in faith, so I'm going to show you exactly how it works. If you watched the last video, you would know what the Deadzones are. The Deadzones are floats on the spectrum from 0 to 1 in which a gun cannot drop. On a 0 to 1 float cap gun, that dead zone is at 0.07 to 0.08, meaning that minimal wear you can only actually get from 0.08000 to 0.15. And everything to the left of that 0.07 is 3%. That's how we get our number, 3% for factory new. But as we said, when that float cap gets smaller, we don't just crop the image, we squeeze it. And when you squeeze it, those dead zones also go with it. So we do that for the acid fade. We find the dead zone by multiplying 0.07, right, your boundary for factory new, and multiplying it by 0.03, the range. What we are left with is 0.002121 repeating. And since our distribution stayed exactly the same, everything to the left of 0.0021 is 3%. Same ratio as a 0 to 1 cap gun. So when you see on the surface that you need a 0.002 acid fade for it to be an eligible filler, you might be thinking, wow, that's super low. There's probably a low supply of those. But it's an illusion because it's 3%, just like every other gun in the game now, just like every 0 to 1 has been forever. And there's around 2 million total supply of acid fades on CS Float database, 75,000 of which are underneath that threshold. That lines up perfectly with around 3%. So all it did was bring the glitched float cap guns back to baseline. It didn't actually make them any worse. But if every filler underneath that first dead zone has the same utility, well then why aren't they equal in price? Let us use the Train 2025 collection. We will go with the light blues this time because blues can be traded up to and thus skew supply numbers. The AUG Steel Sentinel, which is a 0 to 1 float cap filler. There's around 610,000 total AUG Steel Sentinels in supply, and 25,300 of them are in factory new, which lines up with our 3% number. Now for a 0 to 1 float cap, every single gun that's factory new under 0.07, since you don't have to scale down that dead zone, is a good filler. Right, you place a buy order, it fills, you get a factory new AUG, it's a guaranteed filler. There's no thinking required there. Now let's look at the Galil Green Apple. Same rarity, trades up to the same shit as the AUG does. However, its float cap is 0 to 0.3. Our Mike Water 9 theorem tells us that 42% of the supply should be factory new. 850,000 total, 350,000 are factory new. So the equation works. But how many are to the left of that first dead zone? 0.021. 19,000. So yes, there are 350,000 Galil Green Apples in factory new, but only around 19,000 of them, roughly 3% of total supply, meet that factory new filler threshold. Same collection, same rarity, same utility in a trade up, both on guns that aren't widely used. The AUG starts at $1.12. Galils at this float range start at 90 cents. Around 22 cents less for an identical functional gun. The Galil honestly looks better than that fucking ugly ass AUG. And the Galil is actually harder to acquire because you can't just place buy orders. This is why 0 to 1 float caps are usually more valuable. When it comes to trade ups, every cent counts. So you need to get your fillers at the lowest price possible. And if you don't want to spend all day searching for it, you place buy orders in place of them. Now, if you just place buy orders on factory new Galil ARs, right, there's 350,000 factory new ones, only 20,000 meet that criteria you need. So how exactly do you expect to place buy orders and get those ones that you actually need? You can't. The AUG has a convenience premium, the Galil does not. They both, however, do the same thing. Combine that with the fact that you have to do a little bit of math in order to find that threshold, there's a serious knowledge and pricing gap keeping that Galil underpriced. Now, since you can't place buy orders on these guns and you need to find them fast, use UU Skins, today's sponsor. UU Skins allows you to order from low to high float, and the prices you'll find will put you up 50% on your position almost immediately. Direct access to the Chinese market, 24/7 support, and a massive, wide-ranging inventory more liquid than every single site, marketplace in the US and EU combined. It's pretty much impossible to lose in this market if you are using UU Skins to buy your stuff. Don't take my word for it, ask around in the community on our Discord, or scan the QR code right here and check it out for yourself. I promise you, you will not regret it. Back to the video. So, 0 to 1 float caps have that premium of convenience, but is it worth it? Is that premium justified? Yes, a little bit. It comes down to friction. You need 10 fillers to trade up. Now, if you could get those fillers for 5 cents less each, that's 50 cents. And that 50 cents, theoretically, can be the difference between a profitable expected value or a non-profitable expected value. And when it's 0 to 1, every factory new skin is a good filler. That way, you don't have to do anything. You just place a buy order and go away. A .04 Galil is factory new, but it's not a good filler. You need sub .021. And buy orders don't let you specify float. So you're sniping listings manually, or you're going to overpay on a marketplace for said float. Regardless, your cost basis rises. And most people miss why the dead zones exist in the first place. On a 0 to 1 gun, why do you think it starts at .07 and ends at .08? Well, it's to create an aesthetic difference between factory new and minimal wear. If a factory new gun starts at $50, and I can get a .70001 minimal wear gun for $10, $15 less, well then why the fuck would I buy factory new? Craters demand for factory new. But now you add a visual cliff in between. So now even the lowest float minimal wear gun you can get still looks verifiably worse than a factory new one. So now you have two factors working in upping the factory new value: aesthetics and utility. On a tighter cap, that still exists. The cap on the M4 Solitude is from 0 to .049, Dead Zone .056 to .07. There is a visual gap between those two floats. So no, the value of a .02 Solitude is not the same as a .06 Solitude, because there's a dead zone in there and the visual gap is increased. And as we saw in that last video, the probability of a factory new Solitude is 10%. But to the left of .049 is 30,000 Solitudes. To the right of .056 to .07, 80,000. 3 times more common to get that one. And that's because we squeezed the float. That minimal wear probability moved into the new factory new range, making that right side more prevalent than that left side. And all this means for us is that we're early to a supply crisis. Pre-update, large amounts of low float guns were crafted using trade-up contracts, right? Think about all those low float acid fades that were used to create super low float guns. The acid fades got nerfed, but their outputs necessarily didn't get nerfed as much. So you still have a lot of eligible fillers in the market currently. But every trade-up uses 10 fillers, and eventually, those are gone. And now, no matter what skin you get out of a case, your chance of getting factory new for that skin, or factory new eligible for trade-ups, is 3% always. So the replacement rate of fillers is always going to be 3%. And the amount of supply leaving current supply will always stay above that. So we are eating up our excess supply right now, and eventually we'll be at a baseline of 3% in the future. And that 3% barrier is just going to become a hard ceiling. Now factor in Valve charging extra for low float guns on the terminal. And some people simply aren't going to do that when they're charging more for the low float gun than the base price on Steam Market. Some people just don't understand the floats. They're not going to buy it. Combine those two things together, we could very well see a world in which the amount of factory new guns in relation to the total amount of guns, less than 3%. It's something we don't recognize as being scarce right now, but it will be scarce in time. And right now, that 3% that exists on every gun is still at a discount because the market still thinks in terms of factory new minimal wear when you should be thinking in terms of Deadzone 1, Deadzone 2. And it is creating a massive wealth gap that will be realized in due time. So here's your formula. Go to any collection, any rarity you want. Find a gun with a 0 to 1 float cap. Take note of its price in factory new. Then go to another gun in the collection, same rarity, just with a non-0 to 1 float cap. Take the float range, multiply it by 0.07, and you are left with your first dead zone. Sort by float on a marketplace and look from lowest to your first dead zone and purchase any of those skins that are below the fair value of the 0 to 1 because those are undervalued. That is your play. Will it pay off in a month? Probably not. Will it pay off in 2 months? Probably not. Will it pay off in 2 years? Absolutely. This is not speculation. This is pure mathematical design. And if you listen and if you have conviction, this will pay off. Adios.